Good to have you here. This is OmniView, episode 34, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is April 17th, 2026. We'll cover what happened, how different viewpoints frame it, so you can decide for yourself. Israel and Lebanon ceasefire takes effect as Trump hails historic peace effort amid ongoing Iran war tensions. A 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon came into effect at midnight. The agreement pauses fighting in a conflict that has killed more than 2,100 Lebanese people and displaced more than 2.1 million. Donald Trump announced the deal after speaking with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, inviting both for talks at the White House. Both leaders welcomed the truce, though Netanyahu said Israeli troops would remain in an expanded security zone in southern Lebanon. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres welcomed the halt in fighting, urged all parties to fully respect it, and expressed hope it would lead to negotiations. Some intermittent shelling was reported shortly after the ceasefire began. Different outlets frame this development in distinct ways. The Guardian sees the ceasefire as a potential opening for diplomacy, highlighting Guterres' call for full respect and future negotiations, while noting Netanyahu's determination to keep troops in place to prevent invasion and dismantle Hezbollah. Mail Online focuses on celebrations in Lebanon and Trump's description of it as a historic day where good things are happening, presenting the United States' brokered pause as a significant achievement. Al Jazeera and regional voices note Iran's foreign ministry welcoming the truce as consistent with an earlier Iran-United States agreement brokered by Pakistan, linking it to broader efforts at de-escalation across the Middle East. European nations, including the United Kingdom and France, are already preparing discussions on restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, showing allied interest in stabilizing energy routes. One aspect worth examining is how the continued presence of Israeli forces in southern Lebanon might shape the ceasefire's durability. Another open question is what role back-channel talks played in reaching this agreement so quickly, and how the truce could affect wider tensions involving Iran. Shifting now to a very different story making headlines in the United Kingdom and Australia. Meghan Markle faces criticism over commercial events during her current trip to Australia. The Duchess of Sussex is preparing for a £1,700 per head hotel meet and greet with fans in Sydney. She and Prince Harry also met survivors of the Bondi terrorist attack, with Australian taxpayer-funded police providing security. Markle is hosting what some outlets describe as her best life retreat at a Sydney hotel, where guests have arrived and a special dog squad is present. The couple spoke publicly about online bullying and the mental health impacts of parenthood. Perspectives on these activities diverge sharply. A Daily Mail columnist argues that the Sussexes' schedule represents the realization of long-held royal concerns, suggesting centuries-old soft power is being exchanged for direct commercial opportunities. Coverage frequently contrasts the paid VIP events with the couple's meetings with massacre survivors, prompting debate about timing and priorities. Supporters counter that these are legitimate business and personal branding efforts that let the couple maintain financial independence while connecting directly with their audience. Reporting often connects the events to Markle's comments about being the most trolled person in the world for 10 years, and Harry's observations on how fatherhood has affected his mental health. This story invites reflection on where the boundary lies between personal branding and any form of royal-adjacent public service. It also raises the issue of how taxpayer-funded security for celebrity events should factor into public discussion. Moving on to economic ripple effects from the conflict in the Middle East. Kenya is seeking emergency funding from the World Bank to address the repercussions of the Iran war. Central Bank Governor Kamau Thuga confirmed the country is in talks for this support. The request reflects broader global consequences from disruptions in the Middle East, including pressure on fuel supplies and overall economic stability. Developing economies far from the conflict zone are nevertheless feeling immediate effects on costs and budgets. Bloomberg presents the request in straightforward terms as a necessary response to war-related economic pressure on an African nation. The story fits into wider reporting that shows how conflicts involving major oil routes create energy and trade shocks for countries not directly involved. Some analysts highlight the uneven global burden of such conflicts, where distant nations still face higher prices for fuel and imported goods. The situation also illustrates how international financial institutions often act as the first line of response to these ripple effects from geopolitical events. A key consideration here is exactly how conflicts thousands of miles away generate immediate budget pressures for nations like Kenya. It also prompts thought about what conditions usually accompany emergency support from the World Bank and how this might influence Kenya's longer-term economic strategy. Next, we turn to an environmental transparency debate in Europe. United States technology companies, including Microsoft, successfully lobbied the European Union to add a confidentiality clause that keeps detailed environmental data on individual data centers hidden. The provision was added almost exactly as industry had requested in 2024. As a result, public scrutiny is limited to national-level summaries rather than specific facility emissions. This affects the ability to track pollution linked to the rapid growth of artificial intelligence infrastructure. The Guardian frames the development as an investigation showing how industry lobbying directly shaped European Union rules in ways that reduce transparency on environmental impact. Critics maintain that such secrecy makes it harder for researchers and citizens to understand the real climate costs of the artificial intelligence boom. Industry representatives, on the other hand, stress the need to protect proprietary information and prevent competitive disadvantages between firms. This situation encourages us to consider the trade-offs between commercial confidentiality and the public's right to detailed environmental information. It also invites examination of how the artificial intelligence boom's massive energy requirements intersect with stated climate objectives. On a more hopeful note, a significant conservation project is underway in British waters. One of the largest rewilding projects in United Kingdom waters will release more than 15 million juvenile oysters into the North Sea around Orkney. The initiative employs a unique rearing process designed to re-establish oyster beds. Organizers aim to trigger a trophic cascade that benefits wider marine ecosystems and helps sequester carbon. The scale of the release reflects both ambition and the degree of previous degradation in these waters. The Guardian presents the project in positive terms as an expert-supported effort to repair marine environments using natural solutions that also address climate change. Coverage emphasizes how restoring one foundational species can support many others through this cascade effect. The story reflects growing interest in nature-based approaches that work alongside ecosystems, rather than imposing solutions from outside. Observers note that the project's size signals both determination and recognition of how much marine habitat has been lost over time. An important point to ponder is how restoring a single species like oysters can generate benefits across an entire ecosystem. It is also useful to ask what specific measurements will be used to judge whether the project ultimately succeeds. Now, to really understand several of today's top international stories, there is a broader context that most coverage leaves out. Across multiple conflicts and diplomatic tensions, we are seeing how interconnected global systems have become. When fighting disrupts the Strait of Hormuz, the effects do not stop at energy prices. Nations like Kenya immediately face budget gaps that require emergency international loans. European rules on data center emissions are quietly shaped by lobbying from American technology giants whose artificial intelligence growth depends on vast amounts of electricity often generated by fossil fuels. At the same time, marine restoration projects attempt to use nature itself to pull carbon from the atmosphere and rebuild food chains. What connects these apparently separate stories is the reality that local actions now produce distant consequences almost instantly. Energy shocks travel through financial markets, diplomatic rifts become domestic political opportunities, and environmental choices in one region influence global climate targets. The common misunderstanding is that these events can be viewed in isolation. In practice, they form part of a single web where security, economy, environment, and politics constantly influence one another. Next time you encounter reporting on any one of these topics, ask yourself how it might be linked to developments in the other areas. That single mental step often reveals patterns the headlines alone miss. In the realm of international protest movements, anti-war demonstrations in Western countries have remained notably muted, despite widespread opposition to the Iran conflict. Protests have been smaller and less intense than those seen over Gaza or Ukraine. Analysts cite protest fatigue after years of other crises, fear of potential repercussions, and growing disillusionment with the effectiveness of street action. Social media activism continues, but traditional mass mobilization has not followed. Al Jazeera examines why global opposition has not produced large street demonstrations in the West, pointing to a combination of exhaustion from repeated conflicts, worries about being labeled in particular ways, and skepticism that protests change policy. The coverage contrasts this restraint with more visible activism on other international issues. Iranian creators have turned to viral Lego videos that exploit political divisions inside the United States, offering an alternative channel for narrative influence that has gained significant traction. This raises broader questions about what actually drives public engagement with foreign policy in different contexts. It is useful to reflect on why public outrage translates into physical protests for some conflicts, but not for others. We might also consider how effective alternative narrative tools like viral videos prove compared with traditional demonstrations. Turning to European politics, a public disagreement between leaders has taken on larger meaning. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has faced domestic repercussions after a public rebuke from United States President Donald Trump. The exchange covered issues including the Pope, Iran policy, and a defense arrangement with Israel. The rift has been building since the United States-Israel war with Iran began and is now being interpreted as a potential political opportunity for Meloni ahead of Italy's 2027 elections. France 24 describes the moment as Meloni asserting that allies are not vassals, framing her position as a defense of Italian sovereignty and interests. The coverage suggests the break could ultimately bolster her standing at home by demonstrating strength against outside pressure. It also shows how international differences can be repurposed to serve domestic political narratives. This development prompts consideration of how national leaders balance commitments to alliances with assertions of independence. It further invites thought about whether visible disagreements with powerful partners can actually increase popularity within a leader's own electorate. In Central Africa, a long-serving president has begun another term. Denis Sassou Nguesso has been officially sworn in for a fifth term as president of the Republic of Congo. The event marks continued leadership by the same figure over many years. It occurs against the backdrop of regional questions about democratic transitions and political stability across parts of Africa. Al Jazeera reports the swearing-in straightforwardly as an extension of established leadership. The story sits within larger conversations about governance longevity versus the benefits of fresh leadership opportunities. International observers tend to watch such moments for signals of policy continuity or hints of possible reform. Coverage often sparks discussion about the health of institutions that allow extended terms in office. Observers are right to ask what a fifth presidential term suggests about the strength of political institutions in the country. It is equally important to consider how this continuity might shape Congo's ability to tackle its economic and social challenges. On a lighter note, European football delivered a memorable result this week. French club Strasbourg overcame a 2-goal deficit to defeat Mainz and advanced to the semi-finals of the Europa Conference League. This represents the first time the Alsatian team has reached this stage of European competition. The comeback was fueled by strong support from the home crowd at the Mainau Stadium. France 24 highlights the dramatic turnaround and quotes midfielder Abdul Ouattara, saying the team told themselves that anything was possible. The reporting celebrates the achievement for a club that has not traditionally been among Europe's elite. Sports narratives frequently present such results as underdog stories capable of capturing wider public imagination. The victory also contributes to a strong season for French clubs in European tournaments. One interesting angle is what tactical changes enabled Strasbourg to overturn the deficit in such impressive fashion. It is also worth reflecting on how significant this run is for a club of Strasbourg's historical stature. Finally, an immigration case has drawn attention to bureaucratic challenges in the United Kingdom. Liza Tobey, a German woman who has lived in the United Kingdom for 15 years, was stranded in Dusseldorf after her return flight was blocked. Her settled status had been red-flagged because of what she called a serious Home Office administrative error. The incident separated her from her 2-year-old daughter in Edinburgh after she had taken her 6-year-old son to visit relatives over Easter. The case highlights persistent difficulties within the United Kingdom's immigration and settled status systems, even for people with deep roots and young families. Stories like this frequently lead to calls for better administrative safeguards and clearer processes. The emotional dimension of family separation adds urgency to debates about policy execution versus individual impact. It also raises the practical question of what recourse is realistically available to individuals caught in such situations. Before we go, tomorrow watch for further developments on the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire and any indications of whether Iranian involvement or responses evolve. That's OmniView. For full source links and more context, check out today's written briefing on the OmniView summaries page. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow. This podcast is curated by Patrick, but generated using AI voice synthesis of my voice using ElevenLabs. The primary reason to do this is I unfortunately don't have the time to be consistent with generating all the content and wanted to focus on creating consistent and regular episodes for all the themes that I enjoy, and I hope others do as well.
Without taking the dive, we went on vacation. We had a nice time. My doomsday